Hi, Michelle Glass here. Welcome to Chapter 20, Lecture 20. This is our first episode in the series. And our topic for this video is kind of basic information about the heart. So looking at some special anatomy and then also the way that the blood flows through the heart. So let us get started. We already know the job of the heart is to pump blood, but what you might not realize is that there are two distinct circuits. There is what's called the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. So the blood is going to be pumping blood to the lung, that's the pulmonary circuit, in order for gas exchange to happen. So that's, of course, where CO2 is delivered and oxygen is picked up. And then that oxygenated blood will get pumped back to the heart, or it will move back to the heart, and then the heart is pumping it through the systemic circuit, which is the whole body. And of course, then delivering oxygen to the tissues as needed and picking up carbon dioxide waste. The heart is located, of course, in the thoracic cavity. There is a space in between the lungs, which is referred to as the mediastinum, and that is where the heart is located. It is surrounded by serous membrane, which we refer to as the pericardium. Peri means around, and of course, cardium is referring to the heart. There are two layers to the serous pericardium. You have the outer layer, which is the parietal layer. You have a pericardial cavity, which is full of fluid, and then you have a inner layer, the visceral layer, which is up close to the heart. It's also referred to as the epicardium, meaning on the outside, above or upon the heart. It's important to have this fluid in this cavity because you've got the heart moving a lot, and without that fluid, you'd have a lot of friction between the heart and then the surrounding tissues. Let's take a closer look at the heart wall. So when we're looking at the inside of the heart, you're going to see the endocardium. Endo means interior. The very innermost layer is a layer of simple squamous epithelium referred to as the endothelium. We saw this terminology used when we were talking about the anatomy of the blood vessel, and it came up in our discussion of hemostasis, which was our formation of the blood clot. In addition to having the endothelial cells, you're going to have areolar tissue, and then you're going to have your myocardium, which is composed of your cardiac muscle. And then on the outside of that, you're going to have that serous pericardium that we've already talked about. Right up there close to the myocardium, you have your visceral layer, which we can also call the epicardium. There is your cavity full of your pericardial fluid. And then you have your parietal layer of your pericardium. Here's my basic drawing of the heart. So our heart is consisting of 4 chambers. The top 2 chambers are referred to as atria, or singular form of the word is atrium. And then the bottom 2 chambers are called ventricles. And we do see that the sides are described as right and left. So the right atrium and the right ventricle I've shown here in blue to represent that this is where the deoxygenated blood from the body is coming into the heart. The right ventricle is pumping that blood through the pulmonary circuit, allowing for gas exchange, so that when it comes back to the left side of the heart, it is oxygen rich, so it's oxygenated blood. Notice then that the left ventricle will have the job of pumping the blood to the whole body. So it's responsible really for forcing that blood getting all the way to your big toe, okay? All right, so let's add some detail to our drawing, and let's also discuss the direction of blood flow. Okay, so I've included here some valves. So notice I have valves in between my right and left atria, and in between my left and right ventricle. I think I gave the wrong name here. So it's the right atrium and the right ventricle, right? Okay. I've also drawn in my vena, inferior vena cava and my superior vena cava, or vena cava, if you're doing the plural form. Notice that these are represented as blue because, again, these are large veins bringing blood either from the top half of the heart or the bottom half of the heart to the heart. So blood from the top half of the body above the heart or blood from the bottom part of the body below the heart to the right atrium. So these are big veins. From the right from the right atrium, the blood is going to move through a valve. So this valve separating the right atrium and the right ventricle can be referred to either as the tricuspid valve or right atrio-ventricular valve, which you can abbreviate as the right AV. If you want a tool to remember that the tricuspid is on the right side, you can remember that you try to be right, okay? Okay, from there, we need to add to our drawing. So let's draw in our pulmonary trunk. Pulmonary trunk is still carrying deoxygenated blood, but now we're going away from the heart, so the pulmonary trunk is a really big artery. Notice at the base of the pulmonary trunk, you have what's called a semilunar valve. So you can call it your pulmonary semilunar valve. So blood is going to move from the right ventricle, push open the semilunar valve, go out the pulmonary trunk heading towards the lung. The lung here is in purple because that's where gas exchange is going to be happening. So we're going to go from being deoxygenated to being oxygenated. Blood is going to travel from the lungs through the pulmonary vein back to the left atria. Now, because we're coming from the lungs, this blood is oxygen rich or oxygenated, so that's why it's in red, but because we're coming into the heart, then we are looking at a vein. So remember, arteries always carry blood away from the heart. Veins always carry blood to the heart. Okay, from the left atria, we are going to move through another valve. Now, this valve actually has 3 names. You can call this one the bicuspid valve, the left atrio-ventricular valve, or left AV, or the mitral valve. So you've heard these names before. From the left ventricle, we need to draw in another vessel. So let's add in our aorta. The aorta is the big artery carrying blood out of the left ventricle. Notice we have another set of semilunar valves. So we're going to call this the aortic semilunar valve. And so the blood is going to pump out of the left ventricle through our aorta out to the body. So let's see if we can make that a nice little flow. I don't know how well that will work, but we'll try. Okay, so we're just going to click through so we can see the picture maybe with some movement. Oops, got stuck a little bit, I think. All right, I'm going to try that one more time. I'm not sure how well it's going to work. Seems like my machine's slowing down a little bit. Okay, so let's try one more time. Maybe if I do it this way. All right, so let's talk through it. Got a lot of words written on the screen. Take your time. Remember, you have a pause button. All right, so we start with our body. So it's in green because we're starting there. So blood from the body, so it's deoxygenated, is going to travel through the superior and inferior vena cava to the right atria. From the right atria, it's going to flow through the tricuspid valve to the left atria. From the left atria, oh, big error there, right? Whoops. Have another one. Okay, it's the ventricle. All right, so go again. Starting with the body to the superior inferior vena cava, right atria, tricuspid. That is completely wrong. Oh my gosh. Right ventricle. So we're just going to keep going from there. From the right ventricle to the pulmonary semilunar valve. From the pulmonary semilunar valve to the pulmonary trunk. This is an artery, but it's carrying blood to the lungs. The pulmonary trunk is the big artery, so it's going to go to smaller arteries called left and right pulmonary arteries. From there to our lungs. From our lungs, you have left and right pulmonary veins. And from there, we're going to the left atria, from the left atria to the bicuspid or the mitral valve, to the left ventricle, to the aortic semilunar valves, to the aorta, and out to the body. Now notice I've highlighted left and right pulmonary arteries and left and right pulmonary veins. Sometimes people like to memorize that arteries are carrying oxygenated blood. That's always true, except here in the pulmonary circuit. In the pulmonary circuit, the arteries are carrying deoxygenated blood because we're going away from the heart to the lung to pick up that oxygen. And then notice you have the exception here for your veins as well. People typically like to think of veins as carrying only deoxygenated blood. That's mostly true, except for here in the pulmonary circuit. So I recommend that you memorize arteries away. Arteries carry blood away from the heart, and then then you automatically know that veins are going to carry blood to the heart, and you get it right every time, and you can figure out whether it's oxygenated or not based on where it is in the flow of blood. And then notice that it's the job of the left ventricle to pump that blood to the systemic circuit. So whenever we're going to be talking about blood pressure and all that, we'll be focusing in on what's happening from that left ventricle, because that is the pump for the whole body. Okay, so sorry about my little goof up here on this slide. I think we've got it. So that is it for now.